Hey, and welcome to this fifth open webinar that I've been doing. I started this at the end of March, and at that time I was thinking I was only going to do one of these to try to inspire and help you to think differently about the future. As a matter of fact, on that one we had a huge response. We had close to 1,000 people from all over the world. That was really great. And there was such great dialogue that we had in the question and answer, and I had so much feedback that I decided, all right, I'm going to do them through April every Friday. So here we are on another Friday on number 5. And I got to tell you that I've received a lot of comments via email. There were a lot of questions that were answered. And by the way, there were a lot of questions that were asked after each one that we never got to, even though I extended the time beyond the hour to try to cover those question and answers. And let me let you know, for those of you that have been there before and asked me a question, some of you know I've been answering them because I've been answering them in the evenings. There's many hundreds to go through, plus, as you might guess, I'm doing other things as well. And I still have several hundred to go, and I'm going to get to every single one of them. So if you haven't had your answer to your question yet, hey, it's coming. For those that are new, and we have probably 400 or 500 new people here, welcome. As you know, I'm not trying to sell or market anything. This is all just for you. And I've got to tell you, for those of you that have been with me in the past on these, you have warmed my heart because you have taken action. You are doing amazing things. You've not just listened passively, you actively listened and have taken action. And wow, you, and I'm talking about all you out there, have been making a big difference. Hats off to you. It makes me feel so good. So let me just, for those that are new to this one, just review a couple of key concepts that we covered. I'm going to do it pretty quick because I want to get some new concepts. And one that I talked about is you have far more control than you think in this time. You know, we've got businesses right now that are growing and expanding. Think of pharmacies, think of grocery stores, think of all of those people that are in shipping, logistics. All of these things, they're growing. And as a matter of fact, they're growing so fast, that's a problem. Then we have those that are shrinking or closing down altogether, or they're working with a skeleton staff, or people are working from their homes. And of course, many of them for the first time trying to navigate and figure out how to do that. In other words, wow, there's a lot of things that seem to be out of our control. But the reality is you have far more control than you think. As a matter of fact, I like to ask myself, what can I do instead of look at all the things I can't do? What are the things that I am certain about instead of those things that I'm not certain about? Because certainty gives me the confidence to make a bold move. Another concept that I talked about that I'm just teeing up again in your minds, and that is to put a perspective on success versus significance. And again, very quickly, the idea is that, you know, we focus on our personal success and our company and our organizational success, which is all about us and all the great things we're doing and how fast we're growing and all of that. Significance is about what we do for others. And I've maintained over the years, and I have proof of it, and now you're my proof, that when you put significance over success and you're looking at how can you as an individual, how can you as an organization actually lift the bar on your significant impact to others, you will find greater success following. And now let me give you a new thing to think about that ties into that. And that is post-pandemic success will be defined with what you do now, not what you do post-pandemic. In other words, wait and see is not a good strategy at all. Let's see how things shake out. You're putting yourself behind the curve right away. Plus, you're setting yourself up for being bummed out while you're waiting. Waiting is not a fun thing. But when you start actively shaping the future and you look at that, wow. Matter of fact, I just heard yesterday about a young guy that decided to come up with a company idea. This is before the pandemic. And it was called Taste Pro. And the idea here, I'm just taking my notes because I just found out about this. He was looking at how people can pay for tasting meals from different restaurants and that are brought to you. And it was all done online so you could sample. And of course, the restaurants like this because if you really like the food, you might actually come to the restaurant. And he was all set to launch. Everything was going good. And then the pandemic hit. And of course, restaurants closed down. Ooh, what does he do? Well, he shifted. Matter of fact, he modified his website, created something called Feed the Fight, got donations to pay for local restaurants to cook the meals that would then be taken to hospitals and first responders so that they could have great meals from all these different restaurants. Wow. By the way, what's he doing in that? What's in it for him? And the answer is he's building relationships. And he's building relationships in the most powerful way, in a significant way. Now, I'm just pointing out that example is just one of so many that have come from people listening to this webinar. Another one is I talked about this is a defining moment for ourselves and for our organizations. Will you squander it? That was the title of one of the webinars. And it is indeed a defining moment because we're all being tested personally, as a family, as a breadwinner, if that's what you are, whatever your role is, whether you're an employee or an employer, big company or small company, we're all being tested like never before. And during that time, you kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, but that separation is not done externally, it's done internally in what's happening up here. I talked about my experiences over the last 30, 40 years of traveling around the world and working with many different people. As a matter of fact, I consider all people brothers and sisters as I travel around the world. We're all connected more than we realize. We have far more in common than we have differences if we take a look. And as a matter of fact, what I've learned, just sharing a little personal insight, is as human beings on the planet, the more connected we are, the greater good is served and the more we do great things together. The more we disconnect from each other, the more we distance from each other, that's where disharmony is created. And that's where we end up with, well, eventually you can end up with a war when you really disconnect real far. So it's not about disconnecting, it's more about how can we connect more as humans, as fellow brothers and sisters around the planet. Again, I've been excited about this because this is a global group that we have here. Matter of fact, you know, we've had people an entrepreneur in Kenya that has changed his food business around to looking at what are the things that I can bring up to people that will actually build their immune system and help them eat healthier, and how can I get that to people that can't afford it as well as those that can. Again, it's you making this difference, rising to the occasion. So how can I do more? How can I be more? How can I love more? How can I give more? How as a leader can I be more effective? I think this all plays out with good questions, gives us good answers. Another one I talked about is in the morning, starting with gratitude, because when you're looking at your stock portfolio if you even are lucky enough to have one, and it's going down, or you're looking at you know, your business and closing the doors and living in hope, hey, you know, it's hard to feel good. But if you start out in gratitude and think about all the different things you can be grateful for, wow. And you know what I like to do is create new things I can be grateful for. And that's, again, going back to that significance over success. I talked about this should be physical distancing and not social distancing, and how we should reach out and connect with people, maybe that we haven't seen in a long time, maybe people that we've been wanting to get together with, but we haven't. Matter of fact, I've been doing that. My wife has been doing that. I went down the Grand Canyon in a dory back in 1997 with a number of people, and I've been wondering how they're doing. So I just reconnected yesterday. What a wonderful connection. I haven't talked to them since 1997. And by the way, that was meaningful. It was powerful. And by the way, we're not going to let that many years pass to keep connected going forward. In other words, wow, we can actually elevate our relationships and all of those things, which make you feel better. Oh, let me go back to that guy that was doing Taste Pro. I'm looking at my note here, to Feed the Fight. Something that he said that really stood out. He said, before I made the shift, I was bummed out. I was depressed. There was nothing I could do. because my business idea that I was moving on and just about to launch immediately died when restaurants closed. But what happened when he shifted to feed the fight? Energy, positive attitude. Wow, that's what we're talking about. So the last thing that I'll get into then is the subject for today, and that is about Futureview. Probably the first prime principle of being anticipatory that I shared in my very first speech back in fall of 1983. And that is, here's the principle. How you view the future, to a great extent, shapes how you act in the present. For example, right now, some people are thinking about going to college. Some people are thinking about going to drugs. Some people are actually maybe looking at, here's some stocks to buy. Some people would say, this is not the time to be buying stocks. Some people are actually buying homes right now. Other people would never buy a home right now. Some people are looking at how can we grow, and others are thinking we're just going to shrink. Actually, how you view the future shapes how you act in the present. By the way, how you act in the present will indeed shape your future. So your future view will determine the future you. And I believe our future view is based on a rear view mirror view, not a windshield view of your future. It's based on what we've known. But remember, we're doing things with technology. Even now, during the pandemic, that was impossible just 2 years ago. And the technology innovation has been growing at an exponential level. We've reached the holy cow phase quite a while ago. And there's a lot of innovation to go. As a matter of fact, it's going up. It's not going down. And the pandemic is actually stimulating that. The pandemic is an accelerator to innovation. Think about that. It's an accelerator to innovation. Education, public education. We were kind of coasting along, doing what we could do, trying to make it better as best we could. But now all of a sudden students are not finishing out the school year, not only in kindergarten, but all the way through the university. And so we're going online. What is it doing? It's forcing us, it's accelerating our innovation quotient, how fast we innovate, how fast we look at how do we handle this, how do we do that, how do we solve these problems? And more importantly, look forward to going back? And the answer, as you know from my past webinars, is no, you can never go back. You can only go forward. If we try to get back to where we were, you're not going to be a happy camper because frankly, in every single industry, it wasn't that good in the first place. Perfection is impossible. None of us are perfect and none of our systems are perfect. None of our technology is perfect. None of how we use the technology is perfect. And I say, good, thank God. We need humans to figure this out because perfection is impossible. And there's a lot of impossible problems, but I've never met an impossible problem yet that couldn't be solved. Once you looked at what is the real problem underneath it. I'm not going to get into all of how to do that right now. I teach those things and you can find that out if you're interested. But the point I'm getting at is our limitations, our problems, all of those things is still all about what's in here. Most of them are self-imposed. I actually have a friend of mine who is a speaker, quite a few speaker friends, and he's actually really good. And I was talking to him the other day, and I actually heard him say that I got to wait until I can get back on a stage because that's where I thrive. It's really me on stage with people. And I'm going to have to wait for that time. Well, let me ask you, is that a self-imposed limitation or is that real? And I would say it's a self-imposed limitation. I actually know that person. He's amazing. Heck, he was amazing on the call. He's amazing like this. He would be amazing anywhere he goes, but he thinks he can only be amazing in one place. Gee, that's too bad. He's limited himself. Let's not let ourselves limit ourselves. Let's take the limits off and think beyond. So future view, let's go back to that. My goal since my very first speech, and in, close to way over 3,000 of them, not to mention all of the consulting I do, and this moment with you right now, is to elevate our future view because that'll change your future. That'll change your future. And to elevate it not on hype and, hey, here's some things that are impossible to do. Now, it's based on what we know we can do. It's all about the application. And when it comes to technology, it's never about the tool. It's about how you use the tool. Hey, I know people that can pick up a smartphone and make a call and make $1 million on that call. I know people that can pick up a smartphone, make a call, and lose $1 million on that call. The difference, hey, it's not the brand of the smartphone. It's not your Wi-Fi connection. It's not your cellular connection. It's what you did, what you said. By the way, it's another reason I love us humans, because it's not the tool, it's how you use it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you do to anything, it's how you do it. That's where the magic comes in. That's where AI is not going to take over. It still needs the magic of you and me. So let's together elevate our future view. And by the way, there's the word hope in here. It's been brought up in past, these open webinars that I've done. And I like hope. Hope is a powerful thing, but it needs to be grounded in possibility. And it also needs to be grounded, as we talked about last week, for those of you that were there when I was interviewing a special guest, that you need to have hope, but it needs to be grounded in something that is doable. For example, the pandemic will lift next week, and all of a sudden there will be no pandemic anymore. I'm going to hope for that. Well, you're probably going to be disappointed next week. And now you're going to be even more bummed out. But if instead you build your hope around all those things that you can do, all those things you can be certain about, wow. So I think hope based on that can be really powerful. Matter of fact, for those of you that were not here in the past, for the other 4 webinars, if you go to burrus.com/hope, you will find the recordings of all the webinars. So you can take a look at them if you missed them. By the way, I'm not selling on that site. As you'll notice, I'm giving you some things. I'm giving you a couple of resources there too that you can have. So if you miss some or all of them, hey, you can go back and check those out. So I like the word hope, but I want it grounded in, again, a little bit of reality. So that reality, those technologies that let us turn the impossible into the possible, is part of how we can move forward. With that, I think what I'd like to do is bring in a special guest, and I'm not going to have him turn on his video just yet. Let me tee him up just a little bit, because last week, for the first time, I brought in a good friend and a special guest, Charlie Plum, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for almost 6 years. And he spent that 6 years definitely social distancing in a cell by himself. He did not have Netflix. He did not have toilet paper. As a matter of fact, he didn't have a toilet. He had a can. And he didn't have a lot of communication. Once a week, there was some communist propaganda slipped under the door. But yet he had physical isolation, but not social isolation, because they learned how to tap on the walls and communicate in like a Morse code to the other prisoners. They were not socially isolated, but they were physically isolated. That's for another reason I like calling this physical distancing, not social distancing. And by the way, since then, I've gotten great feedback on Charlie being in there. He is amazing. And by the way, just as a little note, I'm going to be doing a longer interview with Charlie because we only had a short amount of time, and I'll let you all know when that is. I think you're going to want to catch that one. To tee up this one, it is another friend I've had for way over 30 years. He is an absolutely amazing individual, and I want you to discover that. We're only going to spend a little bit of time with him, but like with Charlie, I've just decided, hey, you know what, he needs more time. So we're going to do another special interview of him for those of you that like what is being said here. So we'll let you know about that. And he has been he's been through 2 major accidents. One of them, he was severely burned. His face was burned, his fingers were burned, matter of fact, burned off, almost died from that. And he picked himself up from that and did some things, started a business, and then he was in an airplane crash. And now he was put in a wheelchair as a paraplegic for the rest of his life. And by the way, I've known him for close to probably 33, 34 years now. And this happened way before I ever met him. Both those accidents, way before I ever met him. Why am I bringing that up? He's got limitations. He's got some limitations. And, you know, he can't stand up, hasn't been able to stand up for decades and decades and decades. He's got a lot of limitations and restrictions on his life, yet it hasn't kept him. So here we are, isolated. We aren't able to do all the things that we used to be able to do, and we have restrictions on us. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking to my good friend Mitchell. I'm going to have W. Mitchell turn his microphone and his video on so that we can see him. There he is. Let's why don't you say something so we know where you're there?
And I am here.
Okay, I am glad. You know, speaking of two elements of Futureview, since that's our theme today, I want to bring up. One thing you have never said on the platform speaking, and again, you're one of the most powerful speakers I've ever heard, but when you're on the platform speaking, you've never said this, but I can say it because I've been with you in many situations over the decades. When something isn't going good for you, and there are many times where, again, you have challenges that most people don't have, and I've seen you having a very bad day. I mean, like a day that so bad, I've never had one like that. And I've seen you in a bad day. And it's been amazing to see you're in the middle of this bad day. And here's what I've seen you do every time. Almost makes me want to cry thinking about it. Give me a minute, because it's powerful. All right. You get up, you shake your head and you say, it's a beautiful day. And you look around and you say, it's a beautiful day. And holy, everything changed. Everything changed from that moment on, because you still have the mess that was there. I'm thinking of somebody who had to lay off his employees, close their business, someone who's seen all their investments go down the tube, someone who's looking at the future and they're in a mess that isn't even near what you were at. Just talk to me about, how do you get to that and how does that work? Because I'd like others to try that. And again, I know I'm asking you to share something that you normally don't do when you're speaking, but I'm putting you on the spot here because I think, whoa, is that powerful? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I'm lucky enough to be on the spot with you and talking to hundreds and hundreds of people, 1,000 people, about some of the concepts that I believe so thoroughly I've actually placed on the card that I share with a lot of people around the world. And my message is not what happens to you, it's what you do about it, is a great message. And on the back of the card are some of the quotes that I love to follow and love to believe and have learned from people just like you. And if people go to my website, wmitchell.com, they can download this card, print it, post it, send it to somebody. But
wait, let me interrupt you, Mitchell, and just say, I actually have some mutual friends of ours that I know. One of them has been carrying that card with him in his pocket and by where he has his wallet for over 20 years and pulls it out. And I don't want to gloss over that concept you just shared because it is huge. It's not what happens to you. In other words, you can't control the things that happen to you. But
stuff happens.
Go ahead.
Stuff happens. Life happens. And I believe then you get to choose. Now, no one that I know of caused this current virus to happen. But I've been watching the last 4 webinars that you've done. And anybody who is so busy and has so much important stuff to do that they haven't gone to burrus.com/hope and gotten a university course in possibility.
We're not promoting anything, so let's.
What could be? I'm just saying, if you want to give yourself a gift and educate yourself, those are magnificent sessions, as is this one. And one of the quotes on the card is, adversity introduces us to ourselves.
Oh, whoa. I love that.
That is just so powerful and so strong. and
Whoa.
so believable. And everybody that I know has been knocked down. Everybody that I know has had a challenge that they felt was insurmountable. Everybody that I know, one of my other favorite quotes was, old girlfriend, she's a young girlfriend, a wonderful girlfriend, told me this in Denver once. She said, it's all right to look back, just don't stare.
Ooh, I love that one too.
And
Love
again,
it.
all the time that all of us may have been staring, I have to stand in line at the grocery store. I have to wear a mask. I have to not get up on the stage in front of 1,000 people. But maybe I have an opportunity to get in front of a camera and talk to 1,000 people. Maybe I have an opportunity to come up with some ideas that I'd never considered, because I chose to spend an hour in a webinar with somebody who says, you're in the dry cleaning business and it's not going well. And wow, all of these businesses that absolutely never needed their clothes to be cleaned more, that never needed to have their clothes cleaned regularly, often, daily perhaps. And have you ever considered going to some of those businesses and sharing what you could do for them? And so just that one idea, I never would have thought of that. I wouldn't have thought of that for $1 million.
Well, let me ask you about the Futureview question, because there's a couple of key concepts I want to make sure that we get. And by the way, once again, I'm going to do a longer interview of this guy because he's loaded with wisdom, and I'll let you know about that. But here's another one I want to throw at you that is one of my favorite lines. So the one you mentioned already, now what happens to you, it's what you do about it. This one is unbelievable because many of us, we can't do all the things that we used to do. Our list of things that we can do is so shrunk down. And this one I love, and that is, I used to be able to do 10,000 things, now I can do 9,000 things. And again, that means something coming from you. Talk to me just a little bit about that.
Well, it's again, a basic truth. And in your lifetime, if you're able to do even a few hundred of those 9,000 things that are left in a world of impossibilities, then you'll be one of the most successful people on the planet. Bill Clinton walked up to me one day and said, I think about that every week. And the idea that, what do you want to focus on? What do you want to focus on? Adversity introduces us to ourselves. Another one of my favorite sayings.
Yeah, I love that one.
None of these are mine, but they're all mine now. And we're dealing with adversity right now.
Well,
or we're spending more time with our kids, or we're listening to a webinar that we may not have chosen to find time for, or we are creating some ideas that we never thought about before. So what do you want it to be? Which one of the things? You want to talk about the 1,000 that I can't do? I can't do handstands. I don't know how to do handstands anymore, but I pilot an airplane. And so what do you want to focus on?
Right. You know, another, just a little side note I'll just share. I remember over the years, I got a picture of Mitchell in the surf with someone, and it's on a surfboard. This is, you know, after being a paraplegic and all the stuff that goes along with that, which I won't get into right now on this. He was doing that. I've got another picture of him doing a skydive where he's, you know, connected to another guy and he's going down. In other words, what are the limitations? I remember giving you a call close to Christmas one year, and by yourself, you had just decided to fly to China and back just to get to the next level with your flight miles. You know, and people think, what a hassle, go to an airport. And it's like, yeah, you think you got a hassle? So, you know, you just don't let yourself be limited with what you can do. So let me tie this into Futureview, and I'd like you to share a Futureview story. And that is, again, how you view the future shapes how you act in the present. How you act in the present shapes your future. So when you first became stuck in a wheelchair, a quadriplegic, or paraplegic, I'm sorry, and you were learning how to now get out of that chair by yourself. which is not an easy thing. Remember in that burn before, for our people out there, you know, some, you know, fingers are burnt and off and things like that. So it's not an easy thing. And, but there was a future view that you had that I remember a nurse gave you, and gave you a vision that got you from, I'm not doing that. And you just said, I can't do that. Again, a self-imposed limitation. And I remember that story. Tell me a little bit about that vision that got you that got you out of learn how to make that shift.
I could spend some time, a lot of time, telling you how tough it was when I was burned and how much it hurt and how much I suffered and how weird I felt that I looked. I could tell you about breaking my back, being paralyzed, thinking I'd never fly a plane again, thinking of all the things I couldn't do. And then I had a wonderful physical therapist. So I could name the people in my world. 2 nurses when I was burned, a physical therapist in Denver when I was paralyzed. And her name was Beverly, and she was just an angel, just an angel. And she wanted me to learn how to transfer out of my wheelchair onto the couch, the sofa in the gymnasium. Now you have to learn how to transfer. Unless you like sleeping in the wheelchair, transferring into bed is a really nice thing to learn. And I have found that actually women stand closer to me now that I've learned how to transfer into the bathtub and into the shower and wash the stink off a little bit. But Beverly wanted me to learn how to transfer onto this couch in the gymnasium. Now that was stupid. That made no sense. There was no benefit to this. I already had a place to sit. I didn't need another place to sit. And besides, the transfer onto the couch is the hardest one you could do. The couch is always lower than the wheelchair. You could fall onto the couch, but getting back off the couch meant you had to press. And of course, you're pressing against the cushion, and the cushion is giving way. And I wasn't going to do it, and she couldn't make me. And one day she came up to me and she put her arm around me. And she said, Mitchell, there's one more thing. I said, I'm not going to do it, Beverly. You can't make me. She said, Mitchell, just relax. Just calm down. She said, Mitchell, have you ever considered the fact that the closest way you're probably going to get to your future mate is sitting on a couch or being next to her in bed? And the couch is probably going to come first. 5 minutes. 5 minutes on the couch, off the couch, on the couch. In fact, many of your viewers, I'm sure today, have seen me in the Olympics when I won the gold medal for the wheelchair couch transfer event. And Beverly gave me a future view. She gave me an opportunity to see a future you, a future me. Beverly decided that she understood that I could sit in the wheelchair and complain about the couch, or I could add one more possibility to have my future you.
Yeah, very good, Mitchell, because once that was clear in your mind, again, it changed your future. And because, you know, your future view will change the future you. I'm going to have you turn off your camera and your mic now, but when I go to Q&A, question and answer, which is an important part of this webinar, I'm going to answer some myself first, and then I'm going to bring you back in to ask questions of you if anybody has those. So thank you so much. And again, I'll let everyone here know when you're going to be back with us to talk more about what the wisdom, and there's amazing wisdom that he has learned from the situations that 99% of all of us will not go through and don't want to go through. See, I want to learn from you without having to go through what you had to go through to learn it. I always think to myself, I know old people that are wise, and I know old people that are just old. And the difference between the old wise people, which I'd like to try to do, is that they learned from their own mistakes and corrected that behavior, but they also learned from other people's problems and issues and what they learned and brought that into their life as well. So you're a gold mine for that. Thank you. And we'll be back with you in just a little bit.
And I'm going to leave with one last thought, and that is pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
Yep, very good. All right. Thank you, my friend. All right. Well, Mitchell is an amazing guy. I'm so glad that he was able to join us for this. And I want to talk about essential workers and essential people for a minute, because we know that we've used that category. Now I want to pick a little bone with that. I would suggest everyone is essential. I think all humans are essential. We're all essential. Of course, you would say, oh, of course, Dan, we are. But do we think of them that way? Do we have people that aren't in our minds? Because if they aren't in our minds, we put a limitation on them to ourselves and what they might be able to do, much less what their own limitations are. I'd like to suggest that all of those that are laid off, and there's a lot of businesses that have furloughed their employees right now for an unknown amount of time because they're not essential. Well, in the reality, let's just remember they are essential. And if we think of them as essential, even if they're laid off or furloughed or not working for us or with us right now, they're essential. And if you have that mindset, you might ask, is there a way to redeploy them in a new way? Is there a way to deploy them in a completely different way? Maybe a way that could help us to grow and not shrink during a time where our business isn't doing what it always did before. Everybody is looking at how can we get back to the way it was. And as I suggested earlier, we're not going back, we're going ahead. And our systems were not that good in the first place. So this gives us a chance to do a redefine and a reinvent of how we do what we do. And as I said, actually innovation is accelerating right now. Talk about, let's take a look at retail when we go back and we start going back into stores again. What is that going to look like? Well, first of all, if you're a retailer, you got to think of how can I overcome the fear of the customer coming in to my place? And one thing is, we'll make sure people have masks, all of our employees. Secondly, we'll make sure that there's daily extra cleaning, and probably my guess is we're going to have a special certification for, you know, that each facility has been cleaned that day and disinfected that night. By the way, that's going to employ a lot of people doing that, because right now they don't do that every night. So that's new employment. Another thing that we're going to want to do is probably the whole idea of cashless. In other words, we've been using our phones. We've got the ability to, regardless of your smartphone, you can have your credit card in there, you can have documents in there. And most people have not been using their smartphone to pay for things. Although, by the way, I'm not going to get into the technology of it, but it's far more secure than buying something using an actual physical card that you hand over to a stranger. And if it was at a restaurant in the past, they walked away with it and came back, and hopefully they didn't do anything with that number. This is far more secure, because actually even the facility or the company that is getting that payment by your smartphone isn't getting your credit card number. They're getting what's called tokenization. They're getting a one-time generated number that says you've given permission for X amount of money to come out of your device, your bank account, and go to them. But they don't know who you are, and they don't know what your number is. In other words, if everybody used this to buy things, hackers wouldn't be able to hack in and get all your credit card information, because no one has it. There's nothing to steal. So from a security standpoint, we're far better off having us all use this. But that was slow innovation. Things were going slow. But now we don't want to be touching our credit card and handing it to you, or putting it in a machine that could have been touched by other people and taking it back out again. There's a good excuse to want to do more wireless. Well, good, we got more innovation to take place. What else might I put in here? Let's be futurists for a minute. What other documents do you have with you, you carry with you all the time, that you have to fumble around with, that maybe would be better off in here? Because we are using biometrics. We've got fingerprint, we've got facial biometrics. As a matter of fact, we'll be doing soon fingerprint on glass, which is another thing that can be done. But not just the fingerprint, but get this, the blood vessel pattern underneath your thumb or your finger, which is far more complex and really hard to copy. But that can be done. How about your heartbeat when you do that as well, combined with if you have a smartphone? All of these biometrics, you can't copy, you can't cheat on. And it becomes a way to make sure you're you. In other words, hey, aren't going to be able to hack. So what else could we put in here? Let's just be creative for a minute. How about your driver's license? Why isn't that in here? How about your passport? Why isn't that in here? You start thinking about what should be in here, and wow, it can be quite powerful. Okay, let's take a look at Futureview one more time with another little bit of a different view, and that is thinking about post-pandemic success and how the phases will phase through. All right, it's pretty clear, and again, I shared this in other webinars, and then we'll get to question and answer pretty quick. It's pretty clear that the first phase is going to have to be really getting some good testing out. And the good news is in the United States, the FDA has just approved a home testing kit that they're starting to roll out. And that's an FDA approved kit. We're getting many other, again, I mentioned 2 times ago that Walgreens is starting to do drive-by testing, and they're in 7 states and growing. And so the other pharmacies are gonna be doing that. So we're close to having that testing. One of the keys to other countries that have got to this point faster than us, because they had the breakout faster than we did, like South Korea and Singapore and places like that, they've had wide scale testing for a long time. We were just unprepared for that. So now that we're starting to get testing out there, that'll be big. And it's not just testing to see if you got it. The other one is antibody testing. And I just want to bring this news to you because it's really good news. In New York, they've been doing a much more widespread antibody testing than anywhere else. And what they have been finding is a lot more people have been exposed and have antibodies to this coronavirus than ever thought before. Now, we don't have an absolute 100% assurity that if you've got it, you can't get it again. In other words, you have immunity. But that's still yet to be determined. But if you've had it before, you might have a level of immunity that makes, if you get it again, the symptoms to be much lower. So that would be good. Now, again, we don't know about that yet. We're still working out the numbers and the science of that, so stay tuned. The point is, many people have antibodies already for this exact disease, which means that antibody testing, which is, again, being rolled out, we're getting more all over the place. The key is it certified and is it accurate? So make sure if you do get that, you're not just getting it from something that isn't certified. There's going to be a lot of fake testing going on with people trying to make money. Make sure it's certified in your country with the proper authority. But that's coming, and it's happening already. So that's, once again, how we're going to get people back into restaurants and bars in another phase. Because if you can say, I've got the antibodies, I'm immune, great, come on in. I've just taken a test in the last 24 hours, I don't have it, good, come in. By the way, we're doing another thing. We're going to be able to do temperature testing without having to touch you, like they were doing at airports in China and other places. That's another way you can get in. So we know you don't have a fever, or we know you're immune to it, or we know that we've just done a test and you've got the results and you don't have it. That's how we can get people together and moving forward faster. Those things are coming. Oh, by the way, there's one more. We got to make sure our own hospitals and healthcare systems are prepared and have the proper equipment. They actually have masks, because we're losing doctors, we're losing nurses, we're losing first responders because they still don't have adequate equipment. But we don't want a new wave when they haven't even really handled the first wave. So we've got to get that equipment to them. And again, things are in the works to make that happen, but I'm giving you these things have to happen so that we just don't make everything worse. I want to open this up to questions, but before I do, let me just mention one other thing. I said I would do in that first one in March, I would do a webinar every Friday then through April. And those of you that looked at a calendar, this is the last Friday in April. In other words, this is the last one of these webinars that I'm doing in this way. However, I want you to know that it's not the last open webinar. And I'm using the word open because I also do webinars that you have to sign up for, or for example, I have one called a deep dive that I do every month, and I deep dive into a specific subject with the specific examples of how other companies are using that and how you can use it, and so on, and take questions. Those you have to become a member of my Anticipatory Leader system. In other words, it's not open. Open to me means anyone can attend. And I'm letting you all know I'm going to do some more open ones, but I'm not committing to doing them every Friday like I've been doing. I will let you know when I'm doing those. I'm going to probably put a little different format together, a little tighter, because everything, as you can see, has been kind of off the top of my head with a couple of notes. So I'll let you know about those. So there will not be one next Friday. If you want to look at the past ones, go to burrus.com/hope. And with that said, let's go to the part that I love, the question and answer. And remember, if you submitted questions that I don't get to before we end, I will answer them all. It just might take a few weeks because I have got a very full schedule helping companies and doing interviews and everything else, and I'm having to do them in the evening, and there are a lot of them. But I will answer every single one of them. But I love to answer them right now in real time. So why don't we go to that and have Jennifer, we'll do some for me first, then at some point I'll bring Mitchell back in. For right now, let's see who would like to ask me a question. You can either raise your hand at the bottom and Jennifer will bring it on live. And by the way, when she does that, you've got to go to the bottom and click your microphone on so we can hear you. And you can also type them in and she can read them for me. So what do you got for me, Jennifer?
Yep, let's start with a live question from Radu Baleka. Go ahead, you're live.
And I see your microphone. There you go.
Yes. Hello. Hello, Daniel. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Fantastic. Hi. I'm watching you. I've been watching every single episode from Germany. Thank you very much for these wonderful sessions. Very inspiring, very useful. I just want to make 2 comments. Number one, in my humble opinion, you cannot achieve significance, especially in these times, without tempering your ignorance. And I think this needs to be a theme for each and every one of us, including myself, because this is also what you're showing, and also what we saw last week with Captain Plumb. Ignorance has taken us to this situation where we're in a planetary state where we end up with one crisis after the next. Because what we see today is that we have a health crisis now, but then the next one, it will be a food crisis and a lot of problems in other parts of the world, which we'll have to tackle in the same manner as we're discussing in these episodes. Innovation.
Let me just interrupt to say, I really appreciate your comment. I think it's very good. And that's one of the reasons why I'm working hard at getting as many people on the planet to be anticipatory versus reactionary, meaning anticipating the problems that you can predict ahead of time and pre-solve them rather than wait until you have them. And I think that's a key to making this happen. Go ahead. What's your question so I can help you with what you're trying to do?
So what I wanted to emphasize is a lot of these scenarios are not necessarily black swans, maybe for people who are not too knowledgeable in these areas of science or technology. But in Europe, we have a group called Club of Rome. And in Club of Rome, we have been working hard on these scenarios for the future of the world, for the future of the planet, because we live on a finite planet and we have to take action. And that's why I said this level of ignorance has to be tempered. And I think this is one of the first steps. This crisis, it doesn't matter the origin of it. This moment in time right now for us, for all of us, it's a stepping stone towards making change from within, then without, and from each and every one of us, and for each country and for each continent. Because we cannot continue in the same manner. It's absolutely impossible. We already know that. For 10 years, people have been preached about the models have to change, sustainability, etc., including you, Daniel, anticipatory, taking action. And now you're hit in the face with the crisis, with the situation, and you have to take action. So my question to you is, how can we help people? How can we guide people towards taming their ignorance, or showing them that they lived, like Captain Plum says, the 8-inch between the ears, to open up more. You have so much today, so much capability today to open up, to understand what's going on, and making informative decision, decisive action, pulling the trigger, not live in fear, etc. So all I want to know is your opinion on how can we elevate people from the level of ignorance that it's eating away at some part of our society. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, that's an important question. I really appreciate that. One of the things that I shared in the past and is really important is that fixing the blame for anything, all that does is make the problem worse. You want to try to fix the problem. So with that said, I want to apply it to the words that we use. So I know what you're wanting to do, and it's really very powerful. So if I use the word ignorance, which is implying, it's got a negative connotation to it. And I think it's a great word because it does describe someone who doesn't have the knowledge level to make an even better informed choice. But it implies maybe that they're ignorant or stupid, and I don't like those words. So I know what you're trying to say. I would say change the wording of how when you discuss this, so that that lack of knowledge that is essential to move forward in a productive way is more words, but it's better than saying ignorance, lack of knowledge. It's kind of like someone who is, let me just use this again. This is about change management that I try to help people and leaders to understand. So let me give you a couple of teachings on this. If I'm in front of all my people that work for me, and I say, we need to be better at, or we need to get better at, and then I go on. What did I just say to them? I said to them, they're not that good. All right, I'm gonna put them on the defensive right away. But if I changed one word, I get rid of that baggage. What if I said, we need to get even better at? Now, do you notice how I took away the negative? Now I'm not telling them they're doing something wrong. Now I'm not telling them they're stupid. Now I'm not telling them anything negative. One word, and I changed the whole thing, and now I can move them forward. I remember when I was meeting in the US at the Pentagon with a number of the generals, and I was sharing some of the things that I was talking about, and one of them, I used the word change. And he said, after hearing me, he said, wow, we need to change the culture. And I suggested, and I said to him kind of jokingly, I don't think the Marines are gonna like that. What I meant by that is people don't wanna change their culture. That already implies you're doing something wrong, you need to change it. In other words, I'm fixing the blame without even realizing it. Instead, a really good, I call it anticipatory leader, is thinking about that and changing the wording to move them forward, and says, we need to elevate the culture to increasing relevancy based on the direction the future is going. Who would fight elevating the culture to future relevancy? I would rather be more relevant in the future than less relevant. I'm not going to get a debate. So what I'm getting at is, let's look at the words that we use, and we can get people to move forward when we don't inadvertently make them the enemy to us, because we're putting them down without even thinking about it. And the reality is we never wanted to do that in the first place, but our words can do that. So I'm suggesting be real careful with the words that we use, and if we use the right words, we can get people to want to learn more, and they're motivated to learn more and do more. Or we can use the wrong words and get them to hunker down even further. There's more to it than that, but I think it's about using those words. And again, I've shared on one of the other ones, I want to reemphasize, certainty gives people the confidence to make a bold move. So if I'm uncertain, I hesitate. I wait and see. So it's really important to learn how to speak in what I call future facts, undeniable truths about the future. And there are thousands of them once you learn how to do that. Because once I am stating my case as elevation, keyword, versus change, and elevating, and also I'm talking future facts that you know is true when you hear it. For example, the pandemic will end. Well, who's going to debate that? That's a future fact. I don't need to give you a report or show you a scientific journal that says that's going to end. We know it will end. The question is, what will you be remembered for when it does end? You better be thinking about that and doing that now, or you may not be remembered at all. That's being preactive to a future known event, rather than being proactive, which means taking positive action now. And I don't like the word proactive, because how do I know the actions I'm taking right now are positive? I don't know, gotta wait and see. I'd rather be preactive to a future known event than proactive with still some leftover odds. So I gave you a lot of answer there, but it was a very good question. Watch the words that we used. Okay, by the way, we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I, just like that last one and all the other ones we've had, we've got really smart people that are asking really great questions. And again, the dialogue between us can be really powerful. And let me make one other comment before, so we're gonna go longer than this hour. We're gonna go another 15 minutes at least. And so there'll be time. And so don't leave. I think we got some good stuff about to take place here. Like with Charlie Plum, the prisoner of war that was last week, I'm really wonderful to hear that there were a lot of communications just with Charlie back and forth with people out there that made some really good connections with Charlie, and are now they are working together to do some cool things. So this can be really great. Now I'm going to take another one or two, and then I'm going to bring Mitchell in for some questions, because you might have some questions for my good friend Mitchell. Another couple for me. Go ahead.
Question from Anders from Norway. He wants you to give us some reflections about your Tomorrow Lab concept.
Oh yeah, the Tomorrow Lab, and I wrote pretty extensively about that in Flash Foresight, my book before Anticipatory Organization. But a Tomorrow Lab, the idea is that we're all busy in our organizations doing what we do, filling orders. Again, if times are good, that's also a crisis. You're just trying to deal with all that stuff. And if times are bad, you're trying to deal with the crisis. You're not really shaping the future. So the key is to get some people that are outside, that are in the organization, who are what I would call, have more of a future mindset. Because some people are more past oriented. They think the good old days are behind us and not ahead. Some people think are present minded and they're focused on right the now. But some people are just wired to be more looking at the future and wanting to shape it. And, you know, they're the ones that buy a lot of new tech on their own, even if the company didn't give it to them. By the way, there's a way to take, that's what I call a time travel audit. And there's a way to bring all of them more forward. But I won't go into the details of that now. But if you can identify those like-minded people that already have complementary competencies that could create that Tomorrow Lab, where they are given time to do that, and you take that to the CEO or to the executives and say, we know that we've got to execute and deliver on today, but we want to make sure, since we're in a period of transformational change right now, we're no longer just coasting along. We want to be doing better in the future than we're even doing in the present. We want to create a Tomorrow Lab. Here's the core group. We're going to be doing this based on the hard trend certainties we know will happen, those disruptions we can see coming, so that we, instead of being the disrupted, will be the positive disruptors, creating the disruptions that need to happen, the transformations that need to happen in our systems and how we do what we do, so that we can thrive in the future and actually grow better in the future, whether it be sustainably or whatever parameters you have around that. I have shared that, and I've been actually talking and writing about that for several decades. Companies that have embraced the idea of creating a Tomorrow Lab have zoomed forward faster and done much better. So it really is finding some allies, some other people that kind of are like-minded like you within your organization, and then doing a little trend analysis. What are the hard trends, future facts we know will happen, and what are the opportunities for us? Take that thinking and go forward to the CEO and say, look, we're going to continue to do our jobs, but we need some time devoted for the Tomorrow Lab. And as you have some meetings based on the certainties that lie ahead, which are low risk, then you can go back to them and say, you know, we're going to need some funding for this because here's why. And by the way, if we don't do it, here's the cost of not doing it, which is so great, we're going to have to do it. And now again, I'm tying in quite a few principles real quickly here in this answer, but there's a way to get that Tomorrow Lab funded. And I've got great examples if you'd like to ask further offline about how companies have jumped ahead faster by doing a Tomorrow Lab. Okay. Let's take another one. How about another one for me?
Yep, live question from Steve Brandt. Steve, go ahead.
Hit that mic. There you go, Steve.
Hey, I unmuted myself. It's an honor to get to talk to you. Oh, I'm seeing a photograph of me at the UN. And that's what my question is about. And it's on the shoulders of the gentleman talking about the Club of Rome. I've created an opportunity to talk to someone at the UN next week about how they're celebrating their 75th anniversary. And I want to be effective in asking them to talk about world peace from the context of war is an obsolete form of solving our problems. We are always going to have conflict, we're always going to have problems, but we don't have to kill each other. And this is a principle I've learned through systems thinking, and Buckminster Fuller was one of my teachers years ago. But I'm concerned I'm going to fail in communicating effectively and not insult this gentleman, like you talked about just before. How do you tell somebody that they don't know a certain principle without insulting them? I don't want to use the word.
Yeah, I got it. I got a way to help you, Steve. And what you're doing is really important. And again, with that, if you want to communicate after this a little bit further on how to approach it, I'm happy to help you do it, because you have a window of opportunity there that could be pretty big. So what I would do is, we tend to think in terms of war is crazy. War is stupid, by the way, everybody knows that. And if you go in that, we need to end war, it will be too easy for them very quickly, or that war is obsolete, or whatever statement like that, you'll turn them off right away, because people will be thinking, well, that's impossible, or the world has had war from the beginning of time and we'll have war going forward. So already they're closed-minded to whatever you say after that. So you always lead the conversation with something that is not debatable. Let me say that again, that's the key. Lead with something that is not debatable, but with something that you know you can get an instant buy-in. And often I like to lead the conversation with a question. And that question then will elicit a yes answer that leads them into, now they've already bought into my principle. So war costs, wars, whether they're economic wars, because there are many different types of wars, and there are political wars, there are economic wars, there's actually blood and guts wars, many types of wars. And wars have been part of humankind, but there are different ways to fight wars, and there are different ways to end wars. And as a matter of fact, what does winning mean in a war? And can winning be redefined? Can war be redefined? So I would go with, war seems to be, it might be, you're leaving a window there, might be inevitable, but how the war is fought, how long it takes, what the result is, that all can be shaped with the actions that we take right now. As a matter of fact, I think most people would say the actual physical part of war, where we got the blood and guts, most people would rather not do that. I remember there's a famous quote by the commander of the Japanese fleet, before bombing Pearl Harbor, starting World War II, or at least bringing the Americans into World War II. And, someone asked him about war, and he said, well, a smart man would find a way to not have war, because they were telling him as being real smart about his battle plans. And so I think it's always better to see if there's a way to avoid that war by elevating the conversation, and that's done by not fixing the blame. So really start with something that's not debatable, and try to stay with the things that we can agree on, not the extent of we need to end war, because people right away say that's impossible, and they're going to tune out the rest of what you say, because they're going to think you're radical. Or we need to eliminate war, or anything like that. They're going to debate that, so don't say it. Get to what you really want to do. So here's the homework for you, Steve. Ask yourself, what do I really want them to do? What action would I really want them at the UN to take? And focus on that in a way that will not be debatable. Okay, let's take another one.
Question from Jeffrey Bruce. He says, when we come through the other side of the pandemic to a mostly familiar world, but with some new things, I'm concerned that there will be many people on the have-not side of our society than the have side, and the gap between these two sides will be wider and deeper than before, making it too difficult for those who suffered losses to recover and move back to the have side. Can you share a brief comment on your view of the way this may look in the future?
Well, first of all, if the have side gave just a little bit to the have-not side, then the have-not side would have something. Now, what do we give them? What do we give them? Do we give them money? Maybe they need to know a little bit more how. Maybe they need a little more guidance. Often we throw money at things rather than guidance, rather than tools. But when we supply tools, you'll see that usually things happen. One of the first statements I made 5 weeks ago with this, and even before that, as the virus was starting to move out around the world, was that the virus would seek the fault lines of society. And of course, what I'm talking about is that the people at the bottom will suffer the most. And if you aren't worried about countries like India and Africa and or continents even, then all of a sudden you can see this could be quite devastating. And we should be giving some guidance. We should be looking at how can we help. So I think guidance, rather than throwing money at things, throwing time and effort and tools, which does take money. All of that takes money. But it's like, what is the format for what is the giving that we're doing and helping? Secondly, I talk about hard trends, which are future facts, versus soft trends. And soft trends are based on assumptions that may or may not be true. And I love soft trends because you can change them. So one of the soft trends that you mentioned is that the division between the haves and the have-nots will get greater as the pandemic ends. It'll even be further. Now, that's highly likely. It's highly likely, but it's a soft trend, meaning we could do something about that. Just like in the United States, healthcare costs have been going up, 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 up. And it's highly likely they'll continue to go up, but that's a soft trend. We could change that. There are many tools we could use to change that, to redefine and reinvent healthcare and how it's delivered. And by the way, the pandemic in the United States is giving us a really big opportunity to really redefine and reinvent how healthcare is delivered. Once again, innovation has been accelerated by the pandemic. We just need good thinking people to look at what's a positive redefinition of it, and let's not fix the blame, let's fix the real problem. So I'm suggesting that the haves and have-nots doesn't have to be a further divide. It could actually been brought together in a powerful way. If we think about it ahead of time, it's something you could change. So I'm suggesting that could be changed. Let me do one more, and then I got it. You know what? I'm not going to do any more for just me. Well, I will do on the other side. I want to bring Mitchell in. Does anyone have a question for Mitchell that you would like to ask? Knowing, again, he has had many things that he could do taken away from him. He doesn't focus on the 9,000 or the 1,000 things he can't do. He focuses on the 9,000 he can do. And he's got a lot of wisdom. Does somebody have a question they'd like to ask Mitchell? And remember, you can ask Mitchell questions after this, and we'll forward those on to Mitchell for him to answer separately for you. Anybody have one they'd like to ask?
Yep, we've got a question that was typed in. Is Mitchell back on?
Mitchell,
video
like
and audio?
I'm here.
your camera back on. Let's get your camera on too. I like seeing you.
Click. Oh, yes, yes, yes. There, I look so much better with it on. Yes.
All right, hey, there you go. Yes. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so a couple of questions for Mitchell. First, where on your website can attendees get your motivation card that you showed us?
wmitchell.com, and on the left banner, left side, you'll see downloadable tools.
Aha.
Just click on, if I'm saying the right term for it, but there's a whole variety of items available on the left banner, the left side, and you'll find one that's a downloadable tools.
Yeah, and by the way, what we'll do on the Burrus/Hope page, where we have other tools that I've talked about over the last 5 weeks, as well as the videos of the past ones. I'm going to put that link for you so that you could just, for Mitchell's thing, so you could just click on it. And by the way, he's got some other cool things you'd want to check out. I love his book too. And by the way, I haven't done this yet, but Jennifer is my amazing key person, and we'll make sure that we've got from last week, Charlie Plum's a link for Charlie as well as to how to see his website and look at what he has. Another question for Mitchell, please.
Another question, is Mitchell planning on doing any webinars in the near term? Bob Boland from Boston would like to know.
A wonderful question. No, I don't have any plans to do that, but I know how to get a hold of a woman named Jennifer.
Yeah,
she has been such a resource for me all these years, and I may just bug her about that a little bit. So we'll see.
Yeah. And to answer the question for Bob and all of you, as I said before, I'm going to do a much longer interview of Mitchell that will be both live and recorded, and I'll let you all know when that's going to be, because everyone that's been following, we can communicate out to you, and I'm going to do the same thing for Charlie Plum. So we'll let you know. There's going to be a really nice one that we'll be able to pull the wisdom out of Mitchell and give you a chance to ask questions as well. And by the way, I'll name drop a little bit in here. Bob Boland is just one of many of you out there that has truly he's been amazingly successful, but boy, has he been doing a lot of significant work. Hats off to you, Bob. Okay, another one.
Hey, I've got a live question. I think it's for Mitchell, so I'm going to go ahead and let him talk. It's from David Hart. Go ahead, David.
Hey, Mitchell, my question is, what's your greatest achievement that you've accomplished that you would not have but for your limitations?
Ooh, that's a big one. You've done a lot, Mitchell.
I started speaking as a disc jockey on the radio when I got out of the Marine Corps in Hawaii a long time ago, about 1964, 65. And that led me to more work on the radio in different locations. And finally, to opportunities that groups presented to me because of my perceived disabilities. And when I use the quote, adversity introduces one to themselves, I think people see me sometimes as one who's dealt with adversity and created some successes from it. And I think that's what began somebody coming up to me in a supermarket and asking me to speak to their group. I had spoken thousands of times to disability groups, environmental groups. I was a mayor, I ran for Congress, lots of opportunities out there to share why if you want to spend your time thinking that everything's impossible, you might like to turn that around with one of the other quotes, the last quote on this card: we find only the world we look for. What world are you looking for? Charlie Plum spent 6 years. Dan, I don't think it was the Ritz-Carlton. Was it in North Vietnam?
Yeah. A little. He called it. It was what, the Hanoi Hilton, right?
And I don't think they had down pillows. I don't think. He spent 6 years, and as you shared last week, and he shared with us, he could have spent all his time thinking about how impossible life had become, how many opportunities were no longer there. And instead, he decided to be the captain of an aircraft carrier. I don't know how many of your viewers have been captains of aircraft carriers.
That was after he got out. That was part of his
Yes.
future view. He had a future view in prison that, I think I'm going to be a captain of an aircraft carrier. And by the way, the likelihood of that for a Navy pilot is not real high, and he did it. So, and by the way, Mitchell, he was mayor, ran for Congress. That is not before these accidents. That's after. Again, what is our limitations? What are we self-imposing on ourselves? And, I'm starting to realize, and this is why I love us humans so much, I don't think we have any limitations. I think there's maybe no limitations.
Well, we impose the ones mostly that we have. And if we can impose them, maybe we can de-impose them. And we go back to the future view. And what is it that you would like? What's next is a great question, because you're working right now, right this second, right this minute. The brain is spinning right now for every one of you on the future you. What do you want the future you to look like?
You know, I was, let me just share with everybody, and again, since this is our last one of these webinars, again, not the last webinar I'll do that's open, but the last one of these, I'm going to go longer on this one because there's still many hundreds of people still with us. So we're going to go a little longer. But when I was doing a commencement speech several years ago, one of the things I shared with them is I said, I know you've got people in here, you're getting your bachelor's, you're getting your master's, you're getting your PhD. There were many thousands of them graduating from college. And I said, I know you're thinking big about your future, but what I want you to realize is you just thought small. There's always a bigger big. Never do the big, always do the bigger big. And I said, you know, I remember when I was getting my undergraduate degree and I was sitting in a chair like that and I just got my bachelor's, I was thinking big about my future. But now that I look back from here to there, I think to myself, whoa, Dan, you were thinking way too small. Well, you know what? I'm thinking too small right now. I need to constantly, and I'm giving you a personal thing I do, realize I can't see the bigger big until I can see the big. So I want you all to think really big, and you got to get that plotted out because you can't see the next level until you get there. But usually what happens is we think big and then get real busy doing the big. And it takes a lot of time and money and all that kind of stuff. What I've discovered is the bigger big takes less time and less money if you take the time. So I would think bigger big. I'm sure that when Mitchell first, after getting done with getting over all the burns and had stuff dealing with that, oh my God, and then ended up in the wheelchair for the rest of his life and dealing with all of that, there were big, but I'm sure being a mayor was bigger, and I'm sure running for Congress was even bigger. And if I look at all the speeches and all the probably over 1 million people you personally presented to, who knows what seeds you've planted. I know there's been a lot of bigger bigs. Let's get, how about another one for Mitchell?
One more question from Mitchell from Gary Minor. I perceive you as mostly a platform speaker rather than a coach or a consultant. What will you be doing more of or less of in the next few months?
I love getting up in front of audiences. I love the audience to whom I'm speaking right now. I love audiences that you stand in front of and share with. And the best, most important audiences to whom I ever speak are kids, or youth in schools, youth in detention facilities, sometimes adults in detention facilities, people who are first responders, who serve. Those are my favorite audiences. Those are my most important audiences. And if I'm given the opportunity to continue to share with them some of the very thoughts I have today, one of the lines I use with kids when I open a talk is, anyone can count the seeds in an apple, and no one can count the apples in a seed. What kind of seeds are you planting? What kind of seeds are you deciding? What kind of an orchardist, a Johnny Appleseed, do you choose to become? Because everything you do is planting seeds. And right now, coming up with some of the ideas that never would have occurred to you were it not for this virus thing. Ideas that maybe never would have occurred to you had you not spent an hour or so a week for the last 4 or 5 weeks learning how to plant some different kind of seeds.
Well, you know, Mitchell just gave me some good ideas of how I can help Mitchell. So there may be some ways to get you talking to the people that you really care about the most from your home right there in Santa Barbara in a virtual way. So I'm going to talk to you about how you might be able to get that happening. And then secondly, I'm sure you would do some really great coaching if someone wanted that coaching. So we will let you, through us, you can get in touch with Mitchell and you can have that conversation, because I know he would be really good at that.
And I'm delighted to do that. And I'm already getting calls. Just had a call the other day to go speak for a group in about a week and a half that's putting their hospitality facility back to work. It's been closed. People have been laid off. People have not had work, and they want me to come in to share what you do about it, because stuff happens. And then you get to choose.
I like it. Let's see if we got another question. Now I'm going to make it fair game for either one of us, but I want you to stay on, Mitchell. Either one of us, question for Mitchell or myself.
Yep.
And
I've got a live question.
You know, it's 20 after, and again, I'm just going to go to the end of the half-hour mark to end this, and I've got a couple of comments to make at the end, but let's take a few more.
Live question from Glenn Eversole. Go ahead, Glenn.
Get that mic turned on.
Hi, Mitchell. Yeah. Hi, Mitchell. I had spoken last week about my Charlie Plum's other roommate, so to speak, Ed Davis, a captain in the Navy, and also Jim Hivner, who was a colonel in the Air Force, both shot down, spent 7.5 years as a POW in the Hanoi Hilton. My question is, what analogies do you see of what you use to get through and actually thrive that would be analogous to some of the things that they went through and how they kept that optimism, but yet in reality?
Well, I've watched Charlie in a video done about him returning to North Vietnam and returning to the Iron Forge, as I'm not saying the name correctly, the French spelling of it, but something with the Hanoi Hilton, as it's referred to. And I'm a pretty strong guy. I think I'm pretty good. I can't imagine how Charlie Plum and Jerry Coffey, who are great personal friends of Dan's and mine, I just can't imagine. Can't imagine it. And yet they could imagine it. And Jerry Coffey studied French. When he returned from Vietnam, he was given a year's credit for French when he went back to school because of the French he chose to learn.
While in prison, in his head.
Yes. And the guards spoke French, of course, to North Vietnam, but he wrote poems and he wrote books and he just created a whole world for himself around the torture, around the horrible conditions, around the just despicable food and the whole thing. He created a whole world for himself, as did Charlie, as did a number of other amazing people. So I said, we find only the world we look for. The other great quote is, do what you can with what you have, where you are.
Yeah.
If you have chosen to spend an hour and a half of your day, not because you were bored, but because you wanted a future view that helps create the future you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitchell. And let me just also mention something about Charlie that to tag on to what you just said. It's pretty amazing. Charlie went back, this is about 2 years ago, to Vietnam, and he met two people. And he's got some great, amazing stories about this. One of the people that he met was the pilot that shot him down. And that is an amazing story of that. And then he went to, again, where the Hanoi Hilton was, and actually talked to one of the head guards that actually did most of the beatings, and actually talked to that guy, which was really a weird but interesting conversation as well. So, I mean, how many people that had been there would want to even do that? And he did. And he's well, just like you, Mitchell, a gold mine of wisdom. And I would like to make a observation because I've known you for way over 30 years, and Jerry, as you mentioned, and Charlie. And I would suggest, and here's what I'm thinking, you've never told me this, but I'm thinking that all of them were were really good people before this happened. But I think after that is when they went from personal success to significance. I think they chose to be extraordinary, because I think what's the difference between an ordinary person and an extraordinary person? Extraordinary person chooses to be so every day based on their actions. And I think that you didn't think about it with the words I'm using. You didn't think, gee, how can Mitchell be extraordinary? No, you weren't thinking that way. But that is indeed what I think you did. I think that your statement is so powerful on your card, on the front of your card. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it. I believe we'll either shrink from it, we'll shrink from adversity. These things can pull us down, or we can use them to elevate and to become more. And I would like to suggest that your transition from a successful, whatever the three of you were before, to a significant version of you, an extraordinary human, was because of the situation you were in. So for all of us listening right now, here's what I want you to hear me say, and this may be a good way to wind this down, since we're close to the end of the half hour here. And that is, let's use this pandemic, which is tragic. People are dying. I mean, this is I'm not putting down the negativity of what's going on at all. But it is also, when you have something this powerful, whether it's being in prison or whether it's being imprisoned in a chair, you can use that as a spurt, just like we're right now accelerating innovation, accelerate your own personal growth. This is an accelerator, and I believe the people listening right now, you can transition from success to significance. This is your outcoming. It's kind of like caterpillar to butterfly. Maybe this is your personal metamorphosis that's taking place right now. And as I said, one of our earlier shows that I did, this is indeed giving us all a defining moment, personally and organizationally. Will you squander it? And I know the people that are listening to this and are part of this, you're not squandering it. You have been a light to me, and all of the things that you're doing, wow. And by the way, keep communicating what you're doing. You know, I think I'm going to put an article together, because I've got I'm syndicated and have a couple million readers. Send me what you're doing. I'm going to actually collect all this cool stuff you're doing, and put it together in an article and bring it out to the world, and let them to see what significance looks like. Thank you, Mitchell, so much for being part of this. And I want to thank all of you out there for being part of this. And again, I'm not done with doing some open webinars. They're just not going to be every Friday. And I'll let you know, I'm going to kind of shake up the format a little bit. Thank you so much. Stay healthy and choose to be extraordinary.